You're watching BizPulse only on Africa News Network. First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. Good evening to you. President Cyril Ramaphosa holds the key to better economic growth prospects. This is according to Financial Institute PwC's latest forecast report. PricewaterhouseCoopers says South Africa is in a better space under the Ramaphosa presidency than it was under the previous administration. The report comes amid government saying economic growth might exceed the projected 1.5%. PwC says Ramaphosa is likely to make the necessary reforms to achieve economic growth of 3% by the year 2022. Now it remains to be seen if the PwC report matches with other statistical projections. And joining us in studio is Risenga Maluleke, Statistician General of South Africa. Good evening to you. It's a privilege to meet you indeed. Just looking at the promises that are often made, and especially with projections, talk us through the methodology of how then you would compile that kind of data, in how many jobs can be created or how life would change for the citizenry over a certain period.
Cindy, our job is not to project in Stats SA. We measure what has happened. If we get into the game of projecting, we will put the system of national statistics at serious risk, because we will have advised the nation what to expect. And when that which we have advised doesn't occur or doesn't happen the way we have advised, then it will mean that we will withhold the numbers. And once we withhold the numbers, then we'll have lost our independence. So we only measure what has happened.
If you make the comparison based on historical data, on events that have already happened that you've measured, and you look at what is often pronounced by politicians saying so many jobs will be created based on these kind of interventions, realistically speaking, are you on the same page with the statistician, or rather statistics and industry, government, and what's happening in society?
The job of policymakers in the public space, like politicians, government, is to make commitments once they have looked at the data that we produced. So are captains of industry. But the job of us as statisticians in official practice, no matter how much they predict, we only measure what has happened. We can look at issues, for example, and say that look at gross fixed capital formations, for example. And we say in the last quarter, and the quarter that we're reporting on, quarter 4 of 2017, we have seen them contributing to about 7.4%. That's from the expenditure side. But it's as far as we can go. Whether those gross fixed capital formations will translate into a certain number of jobs is very difficult for us to predict, because as you would know, and from a side of economics, there is always a lag. You will invest like we have seen during the 2010 World Cup, where we have done a lot of investments on building stadia and other infrastructure. But the benefit in employment has come over time. But also our job is not to bring good news alone. We don't have taste buds. We bring good news and difficult news. Unemployment is currently sitting at about 26.7%. And that's all we measure, but and we can see fluctuations in the job market as to whether we gain or lose employment from quarter to quarter. That's our job, but we can't have taste buds.
But your appetite obviously would be around how we progress as a nation, and learnings from previous financial years that we can do differently. In other words, if there's less wasteful expenditure, there is more accountability, there is better infrastructure and support for those that are dependent on the social security. You'd be able to tell whether indeed we'll be able to reach a particular projection or not.
It's quite interesting, and the public has always expected us to do projections. But the Statistics Act doesn't allow us, and we wouldn't be able to do that. It's like driving a car looking forward, having mirrors that actually project backwards, because you pick up what has happened and we report at a particular point. Look at the GDP figure that we have just released of quarter 4 of 2017, returning 3.1 growth in quarter 4 of 2017. We are reporting of what has happened in quarter 4 of 2017. We are already in 2018. And if you look, we do revisions. But when we do revisions based on new data that we receive, technically, we had what we call technical recession in 2016. From the last quarter, quarter 4 of 2016, going into the first quarter of 2017, we had seen the -3 was that growth, and the -7, -0.3 and -0.7 growth respectively for those 2 quarters. Now, when we look at data that we have got now and we did revisions, we have actually removed the technical recession from the series. But that's how far we can go. As we get new data, we look at what has happened, and then we bring the figures. But now, as regards to what will happen by end of 2018 or 2019, it's very difficult, because there are a lot of fluctuations that can inform labor markets as well as the behavior of the economy. So it's very difficult for us as statisticians. And I know you are trying to fish as much possible, but this is a pond that you will fish from, and we will only give you what has happened.
No, we really appreciate you. And I think the clarity is necessary so that we understand what your role is together with other government structures. So and we are able to discern what kind of information to take up as a nation. Maluleke, please stay with us. So we have Kanti Pai, an economist, on the line. Mr. Pai, thanks so much for your time. The PwC report is suggesting that good times are quite a reality for South Africa under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa. Your view?
Good evening, Cindy, and to the Statistician General over there. I think, of course, I think you've been getting a really, really good lesson in terms of actually how we do these things. And I think I probably have an economist at PwC rather than an accountant, because in a way they're actually looking to the future and making some assumptions. And really, it depends on how right you are about the assumptions you make, because even economists use statistical methods, as it were, to try and forecast things. But I think if you have the right assumptions, then you might make it right. So, for example, they might be in thinking, because I think part of what we've heard about, President Ramaphosa is that, he's very well liked by markets and investors, and that therefore people will invest a lot of money. And we know that, with investment comes growth, because as soon as you put money into the economy in terms of putting infrastructure, putting whether it's about the economical infrastructure or even social infrastructure, that adds to the potential of the economy to grow. You invest in skills. So, and he's been telling us a lot of good stories about where he sees the country. I mean, right through the election cycle, he was talking about the New Deal. And so it is true that he will, get us a lot of investment from whether it's from South Africa or from abroad. Then you are likely to see growth. And I think a lot of people are relying on the potential for investment, and that will probably, lead to that. But of course, if that assumption is wrong, and that the investment that has been expected, or in technical terms, or fixed capital investment doesn't come through, then we are not likely to see growth. I do want to say actually that even 3% by 2022 or something like that is actually a low number, given the potential our economy has if we did the right things, from not just investment, from what government can do in building infrastructure, not just private investment, but even public investment, including spending of consumers, our ability to export to other markets, so sell our goods in other markets, and these kinds of things. If we did all of this and we did it right, we probably are able to grow much faster than that.
Mr. Pai, but also the issue around making the necessary reforms, as the PwC report suggests, as a condition of obtaining that 3% growth, which is not guaranteed by 2022. What are the right reforms? Because as it stands, it seems that South Africa besides the red tape and the bureaucracy, we've already had investors in the country who are benefiting hugely. Case in point are the evergreen contracts at Eskom.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think people think those are huge amounts of money. They're not, given the potential that we have. So, for example, if you really, I think this is an important part about reforms. A lot of people who've been calling for reforms, including, for example, the ratings agencies, are saying you must do these reforms because once, for example, you reform the mining sector and you deal with the issues around the policy in the mining sector, you are able to actually attract investors so that you can dig out much more in terms of the minerals that we've got under the ground. That would be a great thing to do. You could reform issues around the agricultural sector. You could do much more in terms of producing from our soil. If you reform the sector, you could do much more in employment, in consumption, all of these things. So that actually, even the numbers that you've seen, coming out of Eskom. Eskom, for example, is producing at the level that it does. Imagine if Eskom was producing had to produce power for an economy that is accelerating. That would mean a lot more profit for profit seekers, for those actually who've been stealing at Eskom, for example, or even those actually who've been benefiting in the way that you have to produce much more coal to fire up our power stations to provide the power, which is important for the engine of our economy. You'd have to do much more in terms of the natural energy that we can take out of it. So there's a lot more we could do if we did the right things. Those reforms we speak about actually speak to the potential of actually even bringing much more people into the economy. One of the biggest things that you've heard the Statistician General talk about just now was that you can have a growth, but you can't actually say how much employment that will create. Imagine now if we were able to be in a position, our policy was able to be reformed in such a way that actually, as we actually design growth policies, those are actually designed in a way that includes people. And the more you include people, that we could talk about unemployment that's much lower than the 26% that we think, close to 27%, or even the 37% or closer to that in the more expanded figure. And yet those people at work, the economy would grow much faster. But because so many South Africans, who are a huge resource to our country, are not at work, so we've got that resource sitting around doing nothing. So all these projections are probably actually, conservative, because we're still not able to enact the kind of reforms that we need to make sure that the next time the Statistician calculates, they find that people are at work, people are employed, companies are investing, people are spending, government is also building the infrastructure, and that the economy is fostering ahead.
Yeah. All right, Xanti Pai, economist, thank you so much. Always a pleasure speaking to you. And in studio, we have the privilege of having Re Risenga Maluleke, who's Statistician General South Africa. We continue with this, not projection per se, but what the hindrances are that is not enabling South Africa to grow at a higher rate than what we're currently seeing.
It's quite interesting, Cindy. I wouldn't want to sit here and speculate. And I think I need to try and share with the public the space in which we are. If you look at what Mr. Pai was talking about, he was talking about the input side, the output side. So how much policies are you tweaking and how much money are you putting in, or how much concessions are you giving in particular sectors, and how much incentives are you putting to get certain levels of output. And then from there, you then have outcomes. That's the space where Statistician is. And then from there, you go into impact. That's a space that needs to be properly researched. And Statistician only either goes with regards to employment, goes to the households and collect, and we come at the issue of outcomes, and we do compilations as in the system of national accounts, like for our GDP. Now, let's look, for example, at the issue of import. From the expenditure side, and we can see that the imports are sitting at about 26.5, and he spoke about exports as well, sitting at about 12.3%. So, if you have that, you could say yes, we're seeing imports coming in, and largely machinery, but it could be machinery that one is just imported now, for whatever reasons that they could be a lot more easier to find in the external markets because the exchange rate is favorable for those who are importing. And then they import earlier and they store the machines. So if they store the machines and the machines are not actually put to work, you are not going to see employment being produced or being generated. But you could also have a machinery that is being imported, but it's a labor-saving machinery. So it means that if you import them and they are going to cut down on 1 or 2, 3 jobs, then you will not see employment. So that's why I'm saying this is a very complex space for us to come and want to speculate by way of projections would be difficult. But even then, for us to come and say these are the things that do not make it happen the way it would be expected to happen, because that space is not ours, and we can't just speculate.
Yes, but based on previous reports as well around education, the quality of living standards of people, whether it's improved over a particular period, let's say since the dawn of democracy, you do have an indication of where the country is going in terms of its economic forecast. Those kind of the trajectory that we're currently taking is probably hindered because there is lack of access to education, for example, or less lack of opportunities, the inability for people to make a success out of their startups. Is that kind of information that would then paint a picture for Stats SA?
There are so many factors that can create an index, and there are so many factors that can create a particular situation. For example, we can see that over time, access to water, electricity, access to education, the number of people that are accessing institutions, and you talk about completing primary education, secondary education, accessing healthcare. We can see improvements from 1994, water and sanitation, refuse removal, but as those things happen, and including in the economy, there is no confirmation that there is a direct correlation between the growth of the economy at a particular point or in a particular quarter and the number of jobs that you will generate. You can expect that when the economy is healthier, certainly you will generate a lot more number of jobs. No doubt it's always the economic theory. But if you ask me, for us to come and say, yes, because we see this growth is sitting at 3.1% of quarter 4 of 2017, now we're looking, we should start smiling and say there will be more jobs until we have gone to measure. And if you look, we have already released the results of quarter 4 on QLFS, quarter labor force survey, which returned a 26.7% of unemployment. And when we come now, we see we had a 1 percentage point drop from quarter 3 of 2017. On the QLFS. So if you see, the economy as in quarter 3 of 2017 had grown at about 2%. Now we're at 3.1. Now you can't sit and put a direct correlation. There are times when it can work that way. There are times when, for whatever reasons, that may prevail at a particular point in time. It may not work the way we would expect it.
How do we compare with other emerging markets that have similar socio-economic challenges as we do in South Africa?
Well, if you look, South Africa is part of the BRICS emerging economies countries, as in Brazil, India, China, and Russia. And if you look at unemployment in Russia, is almost the same like what we have in South Africa. Unemployment in China does fluctuate from time to time, but you can see that in China they have done a lot of work as regards the issue of manufacturing. Almost everything what we wear and dress on, our clothes we made in China. So you can see, but those kinds of issues, as when manufacturing is stronger in some of the emerging markets. Obviously, investors from different parts of the world will choose where the environment is very conducive. And for whatever reason, sometimes they look at the ability to produce. How much can you produce a unit at what cost? So it's a lot. I mean, you look at Turkey, for example. Turkey has had its own share of problems. So direct comparison with other emerging markets doesn't readily occur.
And
like
I mean,
that.
and our lack of competitiveness, as you were saying, that if you want to compete with China, you need to be able to do things at the same level of output, probably with less operational expenses, etc., which South Africa is not in a position to do at the moment. But the learnings, what I want to answer is, why have we not seen a more absorption, excuse me, of professionals or job creation over the years generally, and the economy remaining static?
We have seen that education does play a role in lowering somebody's chances of remaining unemployed. Unemployment for people without education is sitting in the excess of 50%. And for those with matric or less than matric, is sitting at about 25% or something like that. And for those with matric, it starts dropping. But for those who are graduates, it's sitting in the region of about 7.6% or something like that. Now, so when you have higher levels of education, the chances of you landing a job are there. But the question then is the side of the markets, whether the jobs are there, is something else. But from us as we measure, we can see that education does increase your chances of landing a job.
And now with we reporting on quarter four or the last quarter of 2017, which gave the impression that it can only rise from here, in the sense of the 3.1 GDP percentage, that we are doing the right things. All we have to do is just intensify or expedite those kind of programs. And you're saying that it's quite volatile. It doesn't remain static.
It's quite interesting. It's like we have the bones and we are throwing them. And the people say, tell us what the bones are saying. And we say, this is what the bones are saying. And they say, now that you have told us what the bones are saying, tell us what causes the bones to say so. Status say finds it very difficult. All we can tell you is what the bones are saying when we throw them.
Yeah.
The bones tell a story and we'll tell the story. So now if you ask me, as to what should be done going forward, the moment, it's not only projections, the moment Status say starts advising policymakers, be it captains of industry or government, as to what they should do going forward, the day our numbers don't confirm what we have advised them to do, we will shy away from making them public, and we will have lost on the independence. And losing on the independence of a National Statistics Office is one of the most dangerous avenues we can find ourselves as a country. So our job will always be to illuminate the issues as they come. And as to what should be done going forward becomes a lot more complex for us to venture into that terrain, because it's not our terrain. But when we have produced the numbers, we do engage policymakers, we do make them available to policymakers, and then they sit, and as you would expect, within the side of government, you have economists, you have everyone in the industry, in the PIC, everywhere you have economists, and their job is to sit and dissect the numbers and then come up with positions as to which direction to go.
Remaluleke, we really appreciate your time. Just to find out on a lighter note if this will be your signature attire, because we know with Dr. Parile Hota, he had the yellow suit, and whether you will keep to this so you're easily identifiable in society.
Well, it's on a lighter note, but statisticians, Cindy, are not measured by the color of their suit. They are measured by their ability, especially those of us in public practice, to provide measurement and impartially so. That's our job. So the color of our suit doesn't matter. The second issue is, I think one Padile Hutla, the former statistician general, has stayed a lot in the public with a yellow suit. But South Africans must learn to accept leaders as they come beyond Padile Hutla, because Padile Hutla as one individual cannot be the one who sets the trend for South Africans on matters, color, as well as on matters measurement and numbers. State SA does set the agenda on matters measurement.
I take it yellow is not your favorite color then. We're going to have to leave it there. I'm just being facetious. Thank you so much for joining us indeed. That is Risenga Maluleka, Statistician General SA, joining us in studio. And we had Klanti Pai, an economist, on the phone line. We'll take a quick break and we'll see you shortly.